Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. Hope we've got some things to talk about tonight. There's been lots going on in the news, lots to talk about. Now, I've got two guests I will introduce in just a little while. A bit of family party news. I suppose the main thing to mention is that we've got the three by-election candidates working away. I was up in Aberdeen, north of Aberdeen in Dice on Saturday with the team there doing some leafleting. They were out on Sunday as well. That was Amy Stratton, Richard Fettis in Edinburgh as well. Christopher at Murrayfield is going to be, I think, leafleting is already underway. And Nikki Willis as well. I think the team there are going to be swinging into action very soon if they haven't already. So that's great to see this local activity. So we'll take the opportunity of any by-elections that come along to stand a candidate, get involved, raise the profile of the party. That's what we are. That's our primary purpose, political party, is to stand in elections to get more and more and more votes, till eventually we get more and more people elected. So I will now introduce. I titled this "Unspecial Guests." I always say the guests are special, don't I? The guests are not special this time. They're quite ordinary. They're just family party people. So our unspecial guests joining the unspecial host this week are Phil Holden, our deputy leader. Welcome, Phil. Phil is a familiar face to you. And we have Gareth Kirk, who will also be a familiar face to regular viewers. Gareth is our bigger branch chairman. Gareth, welcome.
Good evening.
Right, thanks for joining me. Tonight, we did have another guest lined up, but they've had to postpone. So they're going to be later on in August. So August, what am I talking about? April, probably. So you just got some of the regulars this evening. So we'll have a lot more opportunity than usual as well to interact with the comments. So hello, David, hello, Marco. Right, we just got a comment. Let's just get started with this. Wasn't Aberdeen where the student Murray got kicked out for saying there are only two genders? It was Aberdeen. Yes. You remember that video, Gareth and Phil? It was a little while ago now.
Yeah, so yep. Very interesting.
It just makes you wonder, doesn't it? What would we have if pupils got their phone out more regularly and did more filming? Because I'm sure only a tiny
You should know there's three genders, shouldn't he, really? Male, female, and rapist, yeah?
Of course. Updated according to Nicola Sturgeon. Yeah. Just a reminder what happened to Murray up there. He was expelled from school, I understand, allegedly for filming a teacher, because that's against school rules. But you don't get expelled for filming a teacher. Really. That's not the real reason he was expelled. And apparently the decision was taken right up at the top in Education Scotland. And so, that's LGBT inclusive education in action. Right, what do we got here? Right, Facebook censorship. Facebook censorship is still terrible for the family party. We're still being hammered, and our performance of our posts on Facebook is very, very low still. But we're probably out of jail within the next few days, I would hope. So let's keep an eye open to that. Right, hello, Raymond. Right, there's an interesting question. Right, to my younger colleagues, any comments on
that? One comment from me, actually, and it kind of relates to the guy in Aberdeen who got expelled. I was wondering, one of the questions I was wondering around the LGBTQ, is there actually the awareness of the actual complications that the LGBTQ ideology has for the next generations? So I've got a funny feeling it's, this logical conclusion that it's not the most ideal, promoting family life, promoting society. The best way to raise your kids is with, there is the stats around raising your kids are with mum and dad. The LGBTQ ideology is not great around that. So for the guy to get expelled for that is quite a strong message. I think for me, the recommendation for what can young voters, I think having other young voters demonstrating their willingness to support, like the guy to support Murray, for example, would be a great real message to actually say, hang on, wait a second, we are that future that needs to be cared for, that needs to have the supporting, the backing. What jobs are we going to go do? How is society going to work? What's the economy going to look like? Like, we need a society to work in order for those things to function. So yeah, I think the more vocal and visible you are, I think it's a really strong message to say, hey, this is our future that is being at risk here with LGBTQ. Right now, it's almost ironic how the young seem to be attracting the LGBTQ ideology, holding on to it from a sensitive, caring point of view, but actually it's got huge costs. I believe it's got huge costs. So I think a very clear message would help. Yeah, that's just one thought from me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anything to add, Phil?
Yeah, I think trying to get behind those who are standing up and speaking out, and encouraging people to speak out. Obviously, like, council culture is at its strongest in universities, and if we think we've got it bad, then people who are just starting out their careers and all these kind of things, the pressure on them is probably way higher. Many of us were established in jobs and things like that as kind of woke culture crept up on us and things. And I think there are genuine losers, from woke culture, and that most people are losers within it, and so it's just that I think a lot of people are afraid to speak up, but there's a lot of people there are angry about what's happening and things like that. So yeah, I think being a platform for people to speak up on, and encouraging people to speak up, and letting people speak out here would be a very good thing to do.
The other selling point that we've got, I think, is we can offer teenage rebellion. Because at the moment, dyeing your hair green and having everything, everything sticking out of your body pierced, and all that sort of thing. I mean, that's declaring your gender to be whatever. I mean, that's not rebellion. That's conformism. That's perfectly in line with government policy. So we're offering rebellion. Rebel against what your teachers are telling you. Rebel against the government. But that's what we're saying. But there's this strange situation where rebellion is seen as conforming with exactly what the government wants. I mean, it really is a bizarre situation. Is it unparalleled? I don't know. So I think maybe that's something we can appeal to as well. Now, I've got another couple of interesting. John, we'll come on to Kate Forbes in a minute. Right, this is interesting. LGBT agenda in schools. From my own experience, I'm a 17-year-old, is pretty much in any academic lesson. That's the government policy. Yeah. It has to be present in every subject at every level. So if you'd like to send us some examples of that, we would happily publish them anonymously. I mean, I imagine a lot of schools are in overdrive because it's LGBT History Month at the moment. So yeah, do send on examples. I would just say about LGBT History Month, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago as well, we had an absolute field day in LGBT History Month, because schools were putting up all sorts of outrageous things and events, and we were publicizing them. It was just great. But I think schools have got wise to it. I think a few memorandum have gone round head teachers saying, just be careful what you're putting on your social media during LGBT History Month, because it's calmed down a little bit. There's an interesting one. Is Mr. Putin right about the West's attack on his children? Recent speech. Now, I haven't read the speech or listened to it, but I've got a vague inkling of what he was saying. Have either of you watched that? Have you heard about that?
I've not seen it, no.
Not seen it yet. Although I was aware he was going to do his address.
Yeah. I mean, I've listened to Putin speaking before. I think one of the things he was saying, I think he was mocking the Church of England for considering a gender-neutral God. And basically, he's a social conservative. So he would agree with family party policy on a lot of areas. Now, some people might find it difficult to get the head around the fact that you might agree with someone on one set of issues, but then disagree with them on another set. But I would say there's no connection whatsoever between social conservatism and sort of aggressive foreign policy. I mean, those things are logically disconnected entirely. But it so happens that Putin's policies and views on a lot of social things, I would agree with. I might not agree with the way he implements them, but I think he's right on quite a few things. Have you ever heard him speaking about social issues, moral issues? I mean, it's spot on a lot of the time. Very good.
Does out of interest, because I remember hearing about the oppression of, like, for example, the gay community in Russia. Is that I would have considered him to be far right in terms of, if you're gay, you get locked up and treated harshly. In terms of, is he not as far right as I am assuming, or
I think anyone can get locked up, can't they, in Russia for
anything?
yeah,
pretty
they're
much anything,
LGBT policies.
You'd have a similar trouble if you're an evangelical Christian there. If you have influence and you're pushing in any direction that upsets his politics, then
I think their policy, I'm not sure the details of their policies about same-sex relationships, etc. I think they are pretty harsh. I mean, it's not outright, homosexual sex is not outright illegal the way it was in Scotland until the 1980s or something. So it's not like that.
Right.
But I think I heard something recently that in Russia, you can veto a gay person moving into the house next door to you. So if you say you don't want them, you can object, and they have to go and live somewhere else, which obviously is not good at all. So I think the implementation of it in the laws and various systems, I think, is not good at all. But if you hear him espousing his philosophy, moral philosophy on these things, I think often it's spot on. Of course, opponents would say that's where it leads to. You see, you people, if we let you lot in, it would end up like Putin's Russia, but not in the slightest.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's criticizing same-sex marriage. Okay, fair enough. Criticizing what it was doing to its children and the Church of England as well. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think a lot of cultures around the world look at the West currently and think, what on earth are they doing? Or what are they doing to their children? That's got a widespread view.
Yeah. That's a little bit what I was saying in terms of the ideology in society and the future. But it was interesting, the redefinition of marriage, and we can probably there's a objection to Kate Forbes on that, which is interesting. A comment with the picture saying, "I never would have met my the love of my life," and I was like, I don't think that's you didn't meet him at a wedding, did you? So there's a lot of I think people are just projecting extreme phrases to create a lot of reaction. So it's interesting.
Right. Now, David, another Putin one. Putin did say Russia's got the best prostitutes. I usually bring out that line when anyone's suggesting they think Putin's a Christian. I wouldn't suggest he has Christian values at all, but he does have a degree of social conservatism. Right, what do we got here? So, the Family Party was not an alternative, and Kate Forbes was leader of the SNP. Would any of you vote for them? Right, a couple of ifs in that one, but okay, nothing wrong with hypothetical questions. What would you say? Do you want to go first, Phil?
I think no. I think the issue there is basically I think we've seen this with like Jeremy Corbyn. We've seen it with Tim Farron as well. That when you have a party and the leaders' values are not the same as the party, they can't get anything done, And so, Kate isn't standing on these moral values. She's standing, if you look at what she's trying to focus on, is basically her ability to deliver independence. And she's trying to minimize these issues, So I think if she was taking that line, I wouldn't see any advantage in voting for her, and voting on it for the SNP on that basis, because she's pretty much saying that she's not taking the party in her moral direction.
Okay, so that's a no from Phil.
And I think she couldn't as well. I think
So on face value so far, if I had to choose between any of the. So I guess the question is here. I'm assuming it's if Family Party was not an alternative, it means if would I vote for SNP or Conservative, or at a political level, not who would I choose if I were to be within the SNP. But for me, I think it's probably similar. I would agree that I think I don't know who else I would vote for within the SNP. So if I had to vote for somebody within the SNP, I probably would vote for her. Although I think just as to demonstrate the support, I don't think she'll probably get enough, and I don't think she'll get. It would need to be pretty dramatic in terms of there needs to be a dramatic wave of people standing up. But unless somebody does, unless that wave does choose to stand up and say, I'm going to vote for you, that it'll never happen. So I would like to demonstrate. So for me, I would probably vote for her, but I would probably not be too sure of the impact in terms of how many of others like me would actually demonstrate their how much weight we have.
Yeah.
As in voting for the party itself, I think there still are much bigger challenges. Like the challenges are still huge, but I would know. I probably would vote for it because I don't think the Conservatives have it better either. So I'll actually say yes. I'd negotiate it down to yes, but I'm not sure it would have any effect.
My answer would be if we're talking about voting in an election, I would say I don't care who the leader is. I look at the policies, look at what's in the manifesto, and you vote on that basis. Yeah. I don't care if the leader has got the same religious faith as me. I don't care if they support the same football team. Don't care if they've got the same hairstyle. I'm not interested in any of that. I'll look at the manifesto, see what the policies are, and I would decide on that basis. And on that basis, unless the SNP manifesto, unless they shredded it and completely rewrote it, then no, that would be a no.
What I might say though is if the SNP were taking a good family promoting line, like my inclination is that I'd be pro-union, but if the SNP were offering a more socially conservative viewpoint, that might switch me to be pro-independence, if they were gonna put in place better rules. I see the independence and union as being secondary to the issue of what they're actually going to do.
I'm hearing more and more people saying that. A lot of people talking about Scottish independence. Quite a few people I know say, I voted for it last time, but now I think I'd still sort of like it. But now, what would it be like if we had it now or in the next few years? It would be really terrible. So I don't want it. So that's like you're saying, Phil, that their expectations of how the country would be run after independence are more important than their sort of unionism or nationalism, which I think is quite sensible.
I think in order to argue for independence, you've got to be arguing that Scotland has a different set of values than the rest of the UK. And what I see is a lot of the same stuff, that I'm not proud of what happens in Westminster. I'm not proud of what happens in Holyrood either. And I think there's a lot of people out there who would say the same thing, like, that yes, there are differences between them, but neither of them really represent people, And
Yeah. Okay. Hugh's determined to promote you. Your special guests, Hugh was saying. really appreciate that. Right. So agreement there. Even if Kate wins, she's still a lone voice. Can't roll back a decadent state alone. Quite right. I mean, we'll talk about Kate quite a bit. I mean, in one sense, you sort of feel sorry for her. That there she is, trying to be honest. I mean, when she's asked straight questions, she's not saying the opposite of what she believes, but she's trying to say what she believes in the most acceptable and qualified form that she can. And it's still not enough. It's still not enough. There's still this sort of avalanche against her. Now, it will be possible to look at her in this situation and really, sort of feel sorry for her, sympathize with her under that attack. And I do sympathise with her. It must be pretty tough. But on the other hand, what I was saying that is like when this bloke who tried to be a Lib Dem candidate and he got rejected. He was a Christian. He applied to the Lib Dems and they rejected him. So he took them to court for discriminating against his Christian views. And I just think, what do you expect? It's the Lib Dems. If you join a party that thinks exactly the opposite of you, and they detest your values, but you say, I'm going to join it in any case. I mean, what do you think's going to happen? What are you expecting? So on one hand with Kate, I really do sympathise with the situation she's in at the moment and the way she's been treated. But on the other hand, that's my point. What did you expect was going to happen? But it's very well. We'll see how it plays out with Kate. Sorry,
I was considering sort of difficult questions for Kate. If I was an interviewer or something interviewing on TV, and I was thinking maybe one would be, if you were given a choice between seeing abortion ended in Scotland or seeing independence, what would you choose? And just to see what she would say, with a question like that.
Yeah, a good question. Kate would realise immediately that so option one, you'd prefer to see abortion stopped, open brackets, and lose this election and lose the support of the total independence movement and finish your career off totally. And option two, save
even
your
if
career.
If it had nothing to do with your career, say it's like you rub a lamp and you can make a wish, your only two options are,
it's the same though. It's the same. It can't be abstracted. But that's the situation that Kate's in. She knows that the more she speaks about her beliefs, the more open she is about them, and the more she'd want to implement what she sees as true and right, implemented in SNP policy, the worse that is for a leadership campaign. And I think to put yourself in that situation, the pressure is on to compromise. And surely, at the end of the day, it's quite likely you're going to feel that was that the right thing to do? How have I done? What was it? The degree I've compromised? Was that right? I think she's gone quite a long way in compromising things she said. Her general line is that, yes, that's what I believe, but that's just me. I don't think it's sort of okay for everyone else, but just me personally, I wouldn't choose to do that. So she was talking today about sex before marriage. And she was saying, for me personally, I don't think that's right because I'm a Christian. But for everyone else, she was sort of implying, that's fine for everyone else, and I'm quite happy with that. But that's not what Christians believe. Christians don't believe that God has a set of moral values for Christians and then a totally different one for everyone else. And the situation Kate's in, it means she can never put forward a positive case. She can never say, I believe that sex should be within marriage, and these are the benefits of that. This is why it would make society better. This is why it would help children. This is why it would make relationships more stable. And you could really go on the front foot and present a really positive case why that's a really good philosophy to live by. But she can never do that because she's always on the defensive, thinking, oh, no, this is not going to go well. This is going to be controversial. People are not going to like this. So I'll just try and close it down and sideline it. And then hopefully we can move on. It's a shame, but it's inevitable. Once you've made the decision to be in a party that opposes a lot of your core values, that's the situation you're going to find yourself in.
So this is a comment I've seen here. This is the SNP policy convener asked the finance secretary to consider whether it's time for her to withdraw from the race. He told the paper, I'm at the stage where I would ask any leadership candidate in this position whose campaign is inevitably damaging both the campaign and the cause, whether it's time for them to withdraw. So he's saying that the fairly mild comments that she's made already are so out of touch, that she is doing irreparable damage to the SNP. And I think when you look at Hamza Yousaf, he's in his interviews, he'd said like he would take the UK government to court over the gender reform bill. And so the very thing that killed off Sturgeon and made her, unpalatable, so she had to do, had to go. As soon as he gets elected as leader, he's going to take up that cause again, and be straight back in the same position, having to answer exactly the same questions that Nicola had to answer. And Forbes and Yousaf the main contenders, and so this is your choice basically between somebody who believes that gay marriage is wrong, and somebody who believes that a man can change into a woman just by saying so. And it's going to be very polarizing, I think, especially if those become the dominant issues in this campaign.
If I was an SNP, MSP, or MP, even if I thought I would have had no chance in the leadership campaign, I've got no support, I would never even consider it. Now I'd be thinking, hang on a minute, maybe this is worth a shot. I would imagine, surely, some people are going to put themselves forward. There's another couple of days, isn't there? And there's 2 more days until the deadline. Friday, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if someone else doesn't put themselves forward. I mean, what you have to be in pole position, I mean, all you have to be is, your nose is clean, take a sort of middle of the road position on the gender recognition reform, and surely someone else can come through and win it.
What is the middle of the road on that? What's the middle? That you.
Well, that's what Kate Forbes has tried to do, but I think it's very unconvincing. I think she's been a bit contradictory about it, because she said, no, I don't believe in self-ID. I'm not going to challenge the Section 35 order in the court, but we'll look at the bill and see how we can change it so that it's acceptable with the UK government. And she also said she wants to make it simpler. She wants to make the process simpler and less onerous to change gender, which personally I thought she'd push things a bit too far then, and she was getting into the territory of actually saying the opposite of what you really think. Because if you say you want to make the process easier, you're really you're endorsing transgender ideology, aren't you? Really. So,
out of interest, so the backlash that came from Nicola Sturgeon, or challenge to Nicola, was around the Gender Reform Act and how that creates complexity in society, right? So you had Isla, what's her name?
Bryson.
Isla Bryson
coming
up.
Yeah.
What's their name? And that was a perfect example of what did you expect? You know what I mean? In terms of it's pretty plain to see you're going to find yourself really coming into a problem where you're having to choose between this person and that person, and it's a real fight. So obviously that people realized that was an issue. They targeted Nicola Sturgeon on that. Surely this just makes them like a logical, safe bet. Who's not going to ever have that problem? Well, Kate Forbes. She kind of resolves that problem, because that's not going to be a problem she's going to fight for 110%. She could be pushed to compromise on the Gender Reform Act, depending on the opposition, if I can put it that way. So she's not going to batten down and say this is and find herself in the same corner. So surely whoever so surely she still has a fighting chance by being that person, by the the Conservatives or whoever's been challenging Nicola. Then surely they would prefer a Kate Forbes over.
Well, they've got Ash Reagan as well. I think I don't really know the demography of the SNP membership, but if you look at the SNP polls, with Nicola Sturgeon, they've been an election-winning machine. I think generally with political parties, if someone's winning, and if their main goal is independence, all the other policies, to be honest, they don't matter that much. As long as you're getting elected and you're keeping independence on the boil, allegedly, then they're happy with that. So I think a lot of the SNP membership, when they hear Hamza Yousaf saying Nicola Sturgeon was just a saint and I want to humbly follow in her footsteps, I think that's quite appealing to a lot of the SNP membership, because they just think, oh, great, let's just keep what we're doing and keep winning elections. So I think that would be...
His approval rating is so low, though. So I was looking at the approval ratings, like, you know, Forbes is way higher. It's the polls I was looking at were from, I think, the day before yesterday. I think he was net positive 1 or something like that. I'd have to check that.
I think it's just a poor performer.
Or something, but
Yeah.
or 18.
I think I watched the interviews today. I just don't think it comes over very well at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kate, surely her assertion of Christian values, even in this milquetoast way, is only good, though. The Overton window is far from them. Yes, I would say during this campaign, it is good that she's said them. So I'm not saying it's good because of the outcome for her necessarily, but the fact that they've been spoken by a public figure is to the good. I would absolutely agree with that. So other people, when a teacher says, I don't agree with same-sex marriage, that teacher is going to be safer because Kate Forbes spoke out about it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the way it works.
And it's really brought these issues up, which are basically never contested in the Parliament, that nobody's ever outspoken saying, I disagree with that. But now one person is being pinned down and being asked, hang on, do you personally, agree with these things? And there's going to be live TV debates and things like that going on as well. So I think the issues that we care about as a party are going to move from the sidelines over the next few weeks to being the main issues being debated, by the nation. You know, so a real opportunity for us to say, this is what we believe, and we're free to say it.
I think a danger in these isn't just one televised debate. I guess a temptation for Kate will be to think, right, things have gone really badly, so I need to do everything I can to repair this. How hard will she try to repair the damage? I mean, the temptation would be huge to be backpedaling on various things she said. I don't think she'll do it. But the temptation will be huge. Right, let's go on to, Hamza, the Muslim. I spoke to a Muslim in Edinburgh a few years ago, and I said about Hamza Yousaf, and this Muslim said Hamza Yousaf is not a Muslim. He's absolutely useless. He doesn't represent Muslim values at all, and we're all fed up with him. We don't regard him as a Muslim. He's a token Muslim. In other words, he spoke about him the way that a lot of Christians talk about some of the Christian MSPs as well. They wear the Christian badge or they wear the Muslim badge, but they don't actually represent the Muslim values. So, but I wonder how widespread that is. I wonder what Muslims in general, Glasgow Central Mosque. I understand the Glasgow Central Mosque is sort of more towards the hardline side as far as sort of mainstream mosques go. I wonder what they make of Hamza Yousaf.
Well, I think we've seen the same thing, again with with Kate Forbes and the people that have come out from like the Church of Scotland and all these different institutions to say, oh, I'm a Christian, and I think Kate Forbes spoke about I hold a mainstream Christian view. And so the moderator of the Church of Scotland say, oh, you can't say that I'm not mainstream because, and we endorse gay marriage and all these kind of things, So, I think that, I don't know, within Islam, if there's like liberal mosques out there. I think are there liberal mosques? Or are
there are. Some are more liberal than others. I don't think you get anything. It's not like liberal Christianity, where there's like nothing remotely resembling traditional Christian. I don't think the spectrum's as wide as that. But some mosques are more liberal. I understand that Edinburgh Central Mosque is a bit more liberally minded than Glasgow Central Mosque. I understand that like Blackhall Mosque in Edinburgh, I think is maybe even a bit more liberal. Maybe liberal is not the right word, but a bit more. Yeah, liberal is the best word I've got. So there is a
temperate, maybe temperate.
But probably temperate is that sort of cast aspersions at the other ones. So maybe liberal is the right term. But if I've got that completely wrong, someone tell me. But that's my understanding of some of the mosques. So I've got some awareness.
He says he's a practicing Muslim, doesn't he? He said he's going to fast for Ramadan, which he said he'd find difficult because it's when he's campaigning. So
that's the classic thing, isn't it? I mean, there's no controversy about saying you're a Muslim and you're fasting Ramadan. The tricky thing is saying you're a Muslim and you think children should be brought up by their mum and dad, ideally.
Yeah.
And I think Muslims have learned
that came up in the conversion therapy stuff, because it said, like, Christians were starving people. It's like, I think they're actually just talking about fasting, which is what generally, Christians would say about any temptation or something like that. It's like, have a fast and a pray about it. And it's like, oh, they're starving people to death. These people,
So Kate's forced normal people to remember that Christianity actually mandates these things. Yes, true. Absolutely true. Charles Wright, it's not good to assert Christian values and then say they're unimportant. I would agree with that as well. Yeah, I think, as I was saying earlier, every time Kate has stated an important moral principle, she's then tended to go on and qualify it and saying but that's just me. I don't think this is important for the whole of society. You don't need to worry about it. It doesn't apply to you. It's just to me. And I say I can understand why she's saying that tactically, but I think ultimately it's not true. That's not, and I don't think that's what she really believes either.
I was thinking about how, if I was Kate, I might answer my own question of, what would you do if you had the choice between seeing abortion ended, or independence. I would probably say, well, if you asked me if I would rather, £50,000 or £50 billion, I'd probably say I preferred the 50 billion, but I'd have no way of achieving that, and I'm in the parliament to do something that I believe I can achieve, which is to see independence. When we look at the polls, it's sort of, at times it's looking like it's 50-50 and things like that. And I believe I might be able to sway it over that line. But I think when we look at the polls regarding, abortion and things like that, it's beyond what I believe is my ability to achieve just by the force of my arguing or something like that. Like, it's a bigger step that I don't think I can achieve. So I'm trying to make the change that I can with the skills and things that I have. But
I would say to that, people talk about Wilberforce, don't they? He worked from the inside and he made all that difference. But that was his focus. He was committed to winning the argument and making the change on slavery. Yeah. Look in the Scottish Parliament, which MSP is committed to restricting abortion in Scotland? None of them. I mean, John Mason speaks. He will occasionally say something that's pro-life, but he doesn't actively campaign for it within the Parliament. I mean, how can he? He's on his own. I mean, there's no one else that would help him. So he couldn't even begin to get a bill together or anything. So, and I think with some things as well, you've just got to try, haven't you? Even if you don't think, you're not sure how far you're going to get, you've still got to give it a try.
Do you think Kate's going to be the first and last? If this doesn't go well, do you think she'll be the first and last, or do you think there'll be more?
First and last of what?
Of somebody to say of Christian values. Like for me, there's a is this not a change of the tide? People realizing, wait a second, this hasn't been helpful. This, Bryce an example, perfect one of where it's come head to head with a real problem that's got, we've just made life really hard for ourselves. Surely there's a better way, and that's slowly people are gonna realize, hang on, maybe there was something to these Christian principles, the Christian values, society, and you'll see more Kate Forbes is rising up later. Or do you think this just could be?
No, I would think the opposite. I think in this, Kate's had everything going for her throughout her whole career. Yeah. She's had perfect opportunities. She's kept her head down on lots of issues. Very able. She's made huge efforts to be popular and to be liked and to get on with everyone. Massive effort. I think in preparation for this moment, basically knowing that this is coming, she thought, right, I want to be on the best possible terms with everyone and anyone. So that's what she's spent 6 years investing in. And let's say, for the sake of argument, let's say Kate pulls out of the campaign this weekend, say, or later, or in any case, it doesn't end well. In any case, I will be wanting to say to people, if you're thinking of trying to do the same thing, do you really think you're going to be better at it than Kate Forbes? Are you going to be more charming, more able, more intelligent? Are you going to be able to be, going to be better at networking? Are you going to be luckier than her? And I think it might make a lot of people involved in mainstream parties think, hang on, what are we doing? Well, the Christian organizations that try and place people with MSPs so they can get on the inside of the parties, so they can get involved and then end up becoming candidates and becoming MSPs. I mean, will those organizations start thinking, because actually, I think, I'm not absolutely certain, but I think that's how Kate Forbes got into politics, was through that sort of scheme. I think she was a care intern. I'm not 100% certain about that, but I almost am. I think she was a care intern. So they start saying, well, hang on, what are we doing here? This doesn't work. We need to have a rethink here. So from a family party point of view, I mean, that would reinforce what I'm always saying, is you can join these other parties, and if you keep your head down, they'll tolerate you. But if you actually start speaking about what you believe, they won't.
Yeah.
So if you're ambitious in the party, you're running headlong into a brick wall. And at some point, you're going to hit it, and it's going to hurt. But so to see it coming rather than actually doing it.
That have nominated her that are now withdrawing their endorsement.
Endorsements, yeah.
So you had to, she had to have so many endorsements and things like that. And the very people that put her forward and said, we think she's going to be the best candidate, have now said, I will withdraw my support. And these must have been people that have known her for years and years, that she's built up relationships with, that think she's trustworthy and all of these kind of things. In the background, they must have picked up something of her views and things like that as well. But now they're sort of like, okay, you're on your own.
That would really hurt, wouldn't it? That would really hurt. And these people who are jumping ship like that, they're saving their own skin. It's not really that they're concerned about Kate's views. They're concerned about themselves. They don't want to be tarnished by what they think is maybe a sinking ship and will be seen as a sorry episode in SNP history, and they don't want to be linked with it. So I think they're saving their own skin. So.
Yeah. Well, your comment that you made in the last video, I think I watched yesterday, where you said the best thing for Kate Forbes is if you vote for SFP, and I thought that just sounds like you're trying to get votes. And then I thought about it logically, and you said, well, that gives her the best message to say, look, this is these issues are critical, and we're losing membership over it. And actually, I thought about it a bit more, and I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. The only thing that's going to give her anybody in the SNP a foothold is to see a stronger momentum of people saying, I can, we've tolerated, we as the Christian viewpoints have tolerated so much, and getting to a point where it comes head to head, where harm is now being done to children, harm is being done to other people, and it's creating harm. We've got to put an end to it. The lines are in the sand, I feel, and I think that's what Nicola Sturgeon hit. She hit a line in the sand that is kind of hard to detect, but as soon as she crossed it, it was felt really, really real. And I think that for me is where I was beginning to realize, actually, that is probably, I was thinking, what could we, what could she do? What is her best next action? And I think the only hope, I'm not putting too much thought into it, but I think the only hope is to go 110% with her values, nail it hard, and saying, this is what I stand for. This is what I think is going to solve the problem. Actually, it's going to solve the problem. And and if she gets shut down for it, that's okay, because at some point that's going to be really valuable. But because she didn't let go of her values.
I think she can get a long way by being honest. Not necessarily, like going completely sold out on everything that she believes and saying it, but I think because the slightest hint of family values brings out so much animosity, that might actually count in her favor with the party members, and it's the party members that get to vote, isn't it? And not the MSPs. And so we saw that the MSPs were hugely out of touch, with the gender reform bill with, 2/3 of people thinking this isn't right, and yet in Holyrood it passed with 3/4 of the people voting for it, and that shows us, like, even in a country which has got kind of proportional representation, that somehow we end up with politicians that are that far out of touch. But I think
the thing is, yeah. So I was just going to say that the SNP do the sums. They say, right, end of 2022, we're a bit unpopular with this. People really do not like this. Don't worry, the election's not until 2026, and by that time it will have had zero impact on the election. So they put all the controversial things near the beginning of the parliamentary term, knowing that people forget about them, and basically they make no difference at the election time. So I think even this issue, even with Hamza, okay, it'll rumble on, and who knows what will happen. Probably nothing will happen. But by the next election, would they be worried about it? Not particularly, I don't think.
Well, Hamza's said, that there are hints in what he said that Kate might not be welcome in his cabinet. That he said one thing saying that she kind of would be, and then there's something later saying he's running a progressive, he'd have a progressive cabinet if he was doing it, which people saw as a hint that he might not include her. And I just wonder, like, where they kind of get the talent from as well, because she's probably the most competent person that they have for running finances. But the fallout from this leadership contest, might see her as a backbencher, basically.
Well, they're the options, aren't they? Kate could keep a ministerial job, and she could go back into basically not saying anything controversial mode for another few terms of the parliament. Who knows what, or on the backbenches. But I would think surely she'll be so hurt by it, and to have spent 6 years building relationships and doing everything right in that parliament, doing everything right in every relationship with every member of the SNP she's ever met, and then to get this, I think it's very difficult to see her carrying on in the SNP, unless there's some sort of extremely unexpected turnaround. I think it's very difficult to imagine her carrying on with the SNP. I think she will be thinking of Plan B. I would imagine. It would be quite remarkable if she's not. If your party turns on you and savages you because of your most heartfelt beliefs, then
she's got her defenders though as well. So the feminists are coming to her defense. Joanna Cherry and
yes,
Regan,
sort of, but not.
Yeah,
but not.
If she were to win, out of interest, what would the repercussions be? Would she then equally decide a new cabinet, and again, could she just rehaul the whole thing, or
what would happen if she won is all the opposition parties would just be ready to pounce at the slightest whiff of social conservatism. So if she just tried to say rein in the buffer zone bill, or just take the worst aspects out of conversion therapy, the other parties would be all over them.
So they would be worried. SNP, i.e., dictating the end of the SNP is
yeah, they'd be attacking the SNP, and they say the SNP is not upholding LGBT right.
Where the Green Party ends and the SNP begins.
Right.
But if Kate Forbes was heading up the SNP, that alliance would break down, and that might trigger an election, basically. Because
I'm not sure it can trigger an election. Some people seem to think it can. Others say there's no such thing as triggering an election in the Scottish system. It carries on.
Yeah, I just mean in that they wouldn't be able to get policy through. So they'd need to, if the Greens aren't on side, then they kind of need them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the thing with Kate, so if Kate was doing that, she was First Minister, and she's just trying to take the worst edges off, just trying to slightly dilute the bad stuff that the SNP is doing, then the other parties would attack her. And the other MSPs in the SNP, they'd be saying, for a start, they would disagree with what Kate was doing. So I'm not sure she'd be able to do it in any case. And they'd also start saying, this is electoral suicide for us. Strategically, this is a really bad move. If we've got the Conservatives criticizing us for not being progressive enough, we're in trouble here. This formula is not going to work with the electorate of Scotland, and they would be right.
I think the issue that she's got, she needs an election because the manifesto pledges that she's got to push forward, of the buffer zone stuff, the gender reform stuff, all of these things. Like, how can she be pushing them forward when she doesn't believe in them? And those people that do believe in them will be saying, you're basically being a bit weak in the way that you're doing this. Yeah. You're saying, let's look at this. Let's have a review of that. But these are manifesto things that we got elected on. You need to do a bit better at this. That she needs to I think have an election with a new manifesto if she wants to survive, basically.
I would say that, but that's an impossible situation as well. Yeah. Because the SNP cannot put together a manifesto that has all the other parties criticizing them for being too socially conservative. Partly because the SNP don't want it, and partly because the SNP would see it as electorally suicidal, which it would be. It would be. Mm. So I can't see how she could win. It's just like a lose situation.
Unless it's just saying, unless he brings across which might be a positive thing in terms of saying, well, I'm not going to progress the LGBT thing anymore because that was harmful. So we're going to put those things aside. Let's bring back the key issue of independence, the key issue of NHS, the key issue of economy, and just say, let's focus on those things. But I don't see...
The opposition parties would be all over them. So you'd have First Minister's question time. Douglas Ross would stand up and say, it's a disgrace that this government is allowing the torture of LGBT people and it's refusing to do anything about it by implementing a conversion therapy ban. What a disgrace. We, the Conservative government in the UK and the Conservative Party in Scotland, we want to protect LGBT people from torture and abuse, but you, the SNP, couldn't care less. You're a disgrace.
Oh, right.
And all the other parties stand up and say, yeah, we think so too. It's it's an impossible situation.
So even leaving it not progressing is even worse than trying to change it. So not worse, but I mean, tough place to be.
Many parties, one view.
Right, Hamza used to be a spokesman for Islamic Relief, a Muslim Brotherhood charity. He did indeed. And Hamza Yousaf was also in the Scottish Islamic Foundation. There was a government-funded Muslim group that was intended to ingratiate the government with the Muslim community and to exert influence over the Muslim community and to bring people to prominence within the Muslim community. So Hamza Yousaf was given this role in the government-funded Scottish Islamic Foundation. He therefore had some public profile within the Muslim community. And then the next thing you know is an SNP candidate. I mean, that's sort of bordering on corruption as far as I'm concerned. It's the same. Remember Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh? Remember her? She was an SNP MP a while ago. She was the leader of the Scottish Asian Women's something or other. Again, government-funded organisation. Raised her profile within a particular community. Then the next thing you know, she's an SNP candidate. Say just corruption. I mean, Hamza Yousaf, I mean, his mum got £150,000 to reduce the carbon footprint of her one house charity in Glasgow. I mean, Hamza Yousaf's had the golden ticket all the way through his career, hasn't he? I mean, he complains that everyone's racism everywhere, while he's had the golden ticket to get to where he is, despite, I would suggest, dubious credentials in terms of his track record in various departments. I think his character as well. I've got serious doubts about his character. I think he's vindictive. I think he's vindictive against people who are not very nice on Twitter. He really goes after them with a vengeance. And had this case against the nursery, which was pretty vindictive as well. So I think there's a not particularly pleasant streak in Hamza Yousaf. I would have to say.
I watched your video on how you compared the hate speech compared to what you were getting versus what what he managed to get somebody prosecuted for.
Yeah.
That was very enlightening. Yeah. So,
yeah, I mean, he's had several people have been convicted for tweeting nasty things to him.
barely nasty things, which compared to you, in light of yours.
Moderately, yeah.
Yeah.
And the nursery business, he reckoned a nursery didn't take his kid because of racism, but then he found out they took another kid instead, so it was definitely racism. My understanding of that is it actually turned out that this kid they had taken was non-white as well.
Oh,
so
wow.
the case sort of fell to bits a bit. But again, that spirit is sort of out to get people on the warpath. Do you remember his sort of white speech in the parliament?
Yes.
I mean, really, quite venomous, I would say, the way he said that. But I've got my that's about him. Right, Ash Reagan's a credible candidate. You might be surprised. Yes, she hasn't launched a campaign yet. I don't know much about her, to be honest. She's not a social conservative by any stretch of the imagination, but she is a sort of trans exclusionary feminist or whatever.
She seems to have the most conviction of the candidates in terms of. She seems to have the most conviction in terms of actually resigning, on the issue. It was kind of interesting the way she stood up for Kate in saying that those that oppose her on the basis of her faith are misogynists. I don't get it at all. Is it that all Christians are women?
If someone's a woman, then if someone criticizes them misogyny. Charles, I think you'll find that that's the opposite. I think Ash Reagan is an opponent of the Gender Recognition Act reform. In any case,
I had to look up the definition of misogynist again just to check that I was on the right wave.
Right, Bruce always gives us a challenging comment or two. Christian values are unimportant for politics. Why should they be applied to non-believers in a majority secular country? Okay, I'll tell you a Christian value. Thou shalt not murder. I believe as a Christian, you shouldn't go around killing people. So that should be illegal. So I think my Christian value should be imposed on society. What do you think about that, Bruce? I assume you disagree with me there. So I'll leave you to think about that. Let's see.
What about stealing? Because I'm sure that's
Stealing. Yeah, that's one as well. Yeah.
Lying.
Yes.
Well,
actually, lying isn't illegal. Lying is only illegal in certain situations. I'm becoming a bit of an expert to the law in that area, but I won't say more about that.
I do find that interesting that, in my view, if you take a look at the Christian views and you simplify it down, it has such a benefit to society, in terms of the way in which society works, the way in which one person may trust somebody else, do not envy. Those core principles that are addressed are so great for creating society that allows people to work together to achieve so much. And yet as soon as you can't trust somebody or your neighbor or your company, everyone's in for themselves. It's amazing. It's a terrible place to be. But when you do see a Christian, a proper, whether they declare it as Christian or not, but if it's operating with the principles, it flourishes, it grows. There's a lot of that culture. This Christian culture is so, I dare say the word prosperous, but I find that such a challenge, and people are eroding the very rock on which they stand, to use an analogy.
Yeah. Surely Kate Ford being the First Minister would mean a split with the Greens. Yes, it would. I mean, the Greens have made that clear. I've watched a couple of clips today, and they're basically saying, no way, we couldn't possibly work with. I mean, I know people who vote for the Greens, and you just got to wonder what you've got to say to people to convince them not to. So you're saying you're voting for a party who said they couldn't work with you. So your values are so obnoxious to us that we could not work with you. And then people say, I think I'll vote for you, though. It's very, very strange. Hamza, his white speech was atrocious. Remember, Anna Sawa delivered an almost identical speech in the same debate as well. Almost identical. They were absolutely appalling. Ross Greer is almost peak liberal Christian. in inverted commas. Yeah, I mean, Ross Greer, on his Twitter description, it says Christian. And the other week on Twitter, he said something as foul language as you can imagine on Twitter. So I replied from the Family Party Twitter account, just saying, basically, Ross, you must tell us more about your Christian faith one day. Blocked. Right, Mary, what's most important? Good character, good policy, or being a Christian? Right, that's in terms of a politician. So rate the three of them. Phil, do you want to go first?
I go probably. I might go for. So you probably need good character to get good policy through. I'd like to say that good policy is the important one, because you're looking for you're voting. It's the policies that you're voting for, but you are voting for the character as well. So I'd maybe see them as sort of equal. Certainly, like, good character and bad policy isn't good.
That's the worst, isn't it? Yeah, they're going to be more effective at implementing their bad policy. Yeah,
and then being a Christian, that really the word Christian means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and at the end of the day, like Jesus said, it's not for you to say who's going up and who's going down. Lots of people who say Lord, Lord, Jesus will say I never knew you. And so I think, if Jesus says he's going to look at the fruit of the tree, then I'd probably see those two as being important, that they're both there.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Right, Gareth?
Between them.
So I think three helps one. In my understanding of the word Christian, if I say let's simplify the word Christian to fear of the Lord. Just take the beginning of the wisdom. So because of that, I can trust your character. I know it's not going to change, and I think that'll help influence good policy. So I think policy can change over time and can develop and get better. I would say it has to start off at least good and get better. But I definitely think from the biggest thing that I see, no one trusts a politician. They're just a little bit lower than bankers. Well, that was hopefully that's also now changed. But for me, seeing politics needs good characters. They genuinely do. So I would say that should influence that good character should influence good policy. I'd hate to see somebody who has good character not fight to amend bad policy. If I said that correctly.
I mean, okay. I would say I'd probably say policy first. If someone hasn't got good policies, then nothing redeems that. I don't care how nice they are. I don't care if they're Christian or not. If the policies are bad, then they're out of the equation. I'm not going to consider them. But if they've got the right policies in key areas, then I'd say they also need good character as well. Otherwise, there might well be a liability. I mean, the classic example. I mean, Trump is the classic example. Some of his policies, I think, a lot of his policies were good, but I think his character on a lot of occasions was very flawed. I mean, Boris Johnson. I mean, the Conservative Party were mad to elect Boris Johnson because his character was obviously hugely flawed, and they should have seen it coming. They should have seen coming what actually happened with him. It was inevitable that that's how it was going to end. Whether someone's a Christian, I would be no more pleased that the First Minister was a Christian than I would that the person making the drinks in the cafe in the Parliament is a Christian. I'm pleased if anyone's a Christian, but it's the policy and the character that count. So, Mary, do you want to give us yours? You can put yours in the comments as well. We'll get to them. Or anyone else as well. If you just put the numbers in, well, don't put the numbers because we'll forget what they are. But if you want to give your thoughts in the comments as well, put them in. Right, Bruce, you haven't replied about what we're saying about the Christian values, about murder being imposed.
I appreciate something of what Bruce is saying there. That I think that I appreciate, in like a working or an office situation, I prefer an office where everyone is kind of free to talk about their values and things like that. You know, that everyone is open to discussion. Like in terms of offices I've worked in, one office, probably like a third of the people there were gay. But it was very free in terms of I was completely free to say what I thought as a Christian. They were completely free to say what they thought about relationships and things like that. We had lots of open discussions and dialogues, and there were generally no hard feelings on either side, you know, on it. And then I've worked in other places where, you know, there aren't as many gay people, but everything is LGBTQ, you know, agendas and things, and any discussion of faith is completely shut down, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd prefer the situation where those that I disagree with are free to speak of their values. I'm free to speak of my values, and you're able to get a genuine understanding, you know, to promote what you believe, basically.
Yeah.
And to compare ideas, you know.
Yeah. I would say in terms of like enacting your values into law, I think it's a case by case situation. That's the same for everyone. There's no one who thinks everything that thinks wrong ought to be illegal. So you have to decide case by case. And that's the same no matter where your moral values come from. You decide it on a case by case basis. I mean, in a video today, I was saying, you know, Hamza Yousaf was saying that his Muslim values don't influence the way he wants the law to be, because they're separate things. And I was saying, well, surely if you're a Muslim, you believe your values are divine, they're good, they're wise. So surely, you know, they should be positive. But there'll be some aspects of Muslim values, like for example, you know, dietary things where you don't drink alcohol or whatever. Then I would say they shouldn't be enacted in law. But there's other aspects where I think they should be, or they should be relevant to the government. In any case, the government should be trying to promote some of those things. So I think it's always a case by case question. Bipedal species, you're late. Well, that's not good enough. You could try harder next week. We'd really appreciate that.
I think for the Christian faith as well, that what you're looking for is not outward conformity, you know, so you could enact a lot of rules around everyone has to do this, that, and the other. But if it's not coming from the right place, it's just to avoid punishment, you know, then it's not going to be right.
Right, I can't believe how much of your imagination is invested in Kate failing. I mean, invest in imagination. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but we're just speculating about what's likely to happen. At the moment, it seems like Kate's campaign is on the back foot. It appears that way. You know, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. But we're just speculating about. Well, we've talked about both outcomes, haven't we? We've talked about if she would become first minister, which I think would be very difficult, or if the campaign goes wrong, then that's very difficult as well. I think we've talked about the various possibilities there. Right, it's 9:10. We've got record time. Let's just see if let's go through the remaining comments. Why am I subscribed to this channel? Because it's brilliant, of course. The SFP are officially rebranding as a Forbes for First Minister pressure group. Right. I mean, I think our discussion doesn't justify that conclusion at all in any way. I think, I don't think that conclusion is supported at all. Right. Let's just go down to the end, see if we've got any last questions to bring in. All right. Right, Bruce, not referring to the odd Christian value, referring to the whole set. Yes, and I've replied to that. Maybe you probably typed that before I'd replied. But just to re-emphasize, my answer to that is it's case by case. The same as for everyone. It doesn't matter where your values come from. You have to assess them on a case by case basis to see whether or not or in what way they should be enacted in law. That's the same question everyone has to ask. Right, questions are flying in here. I'm not sure we're ever going to get to the end. They're reappearing faster than I'm getting through them. Right, we're just about at the end. Right. Well, that was a fascinating discussion. I made a video about Kate Forbes' leadership bid on the day she declared it. I made another one today because there's just so much going on. I'm going to make another one tomorrow morning because there's lots of other things happen. Actually, something that's happened we haven't mentioned. I don't know if you're aware of this, Gareth and Phil. The SNP's LGBT group has lodged a formal complaint about Kate Forbes, saying that she's broken SNP policy by meeting their definition of transphobia. And their definition of transphobia includes saying that a trans woman is a biological male. In the SNP's policies, that's defined as transphobia. And today, Kate Forbes said that a trans woman is a biological male. I mean, she may as well have read it out of their policy definition of transphobia.
Yeah.
So it looks like a slam dunk. Now, I would imagine the process to investigate that will take, well, who knows how long, who knows what will take.
Yeah.
But that formal complaint has been made. So it could be the case that some committee or some disciplinary committee or other decides to suspend Kate Forbes in the middle of the campaign. That's not impossible. I don't know how these things work, but it's possible that such an action could be taken.
LGBT group, as campaign group, has said that, you know, we don't want to mention any names as like a neutral group politically, but the tone of this leadership contest, you know, is bound to lead to violence towards transgender people, basically something along those lines, you know, and really, like, anything that Kate Forbes has said is so far from anything to do with violence, you know.
Yeah. Right, we will tie things up there. Thank you to our very routine guests. Great to have you back, and we'll see you over the next few weeks on the live stream. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments as well. We've had a bumper crop of comments then. It's been good to be able to respond to a lot of them, and we'll see you next week. Right,
cool.
Good night.
See ya.